At 3:47 this afternoon, Chief Justice John Roberts called the Senate to order for the final vote on conviction. Quote, "The question is, shall the president be convicted on the articles of impeachment? Senators will vote aye or nay. The clerk will call the roll." The chamber fell silent. 100 senators. 67 votes needed. And for the next 17 minutes, as each senator's name was called and each responded with guilty or not guilty, the math became clear. At 4:04 p.m., the clerk reported the tally to Chief Justice Roberts. Roberts stood. The chamber held its breath, and he announced the verdict that has never been announced in American history. Quote, "On this vote, the ayes are 68, the nays are 32, 2/3 of the senators present having voted guilty. The president is convicted on all articles of impeachment. Under the Constitution of the United States, the president is removed from office effective immediately." The Senate chamber erupted. Some senators stood and applauded. Others sat in stunned silence. And at 4:07 p.m., 3 minutes after Chief Justice Roberts declared him removed, the president posted on social media from the White House, quote, "The Senate vote is illegitimate and void. I do not accept this conviction. I remain President of the United States. I will continue executing my duties, and I will not leave the White House." Subscribe to this channel immediately, because what I am about to walk you through is not the end of the constitutional crisis. This is the beginning of the most dangerous phase. The Senate has removed the president, but the president refuses to accept removal. And for the next hours or days, the United States will have two people claiming to be president with no clear mechanism for resolving who actually holds the office. Turn on notifications. Set them to all. Because what happens in the next 24 hours will determine whether American democracy survived this crisis or whether we have entered a period of constitutional collapse where removal from office means nothing if the removed president has the power to resist. Here is what happened during that vote, because the roll call reveals which Republicans voted to convict and why the total reached 68. At 3:47 p.m., the clerk began calling names alphabetically. Senator Baldwin of Wisconsin, Democrat, voted guilty. Senator Barrasso of Wyoming, Republican, voted not guilty. And so it went for 15 minutes. But when the clerk reached McConnell of Kentucky, the chamber paused. Mitch McConnell, Senate Republican leader for 17 years, stood and stated clearly, guilty on all three articles. The impact was immediate. McConnell's vote gave permission for other Republicans to follow, and they did. The 17 Republicans who voted guilty are Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, Mitt Romney of Utah, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Susan Collins of Maine, Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, Ben Sasse of Nebraska, Richard Burr of North Carolina, Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, Rob Portman of Ohio, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia, Joni Ernst of Iowa, Mike Rounds of South Dakota, Todd Young of Indiana, John Thune of South Dakota, Roger Marshall of Kansas, and Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi. The last two, Marshall and Hyde-Smith, were surprises. Neither had signaled publicly that they would vote to convict, but both stated after the vote that the evidence of Supreme Court defiance was disqualifying. At 4:04 p.m., when the tally was announced, the math was clear. 51 Democrats and independents voted guilty. 17 Republicans voted guilty. Total, 68, exactly one more than the 67 required. The president was convicted on Article 1, defying Supreme Court authority, convicted on Article 2, abuse of emergency powers, and convicted on Article 3, obstruction of justice. He is the first president in American history to be removed from office by Senate conviction. Hit that like button right now if you understand the magnitude of this moment. The Senate just removed a sitting president. The algorithm decides what breaks through. You decide whether this analysis reaches people who need to see it. Because what I am showing you is a constitutional system attempting to enforce its most severe remedy for presidential misconduct. At 4:07 p.m., the president responded. His post on social media stated, "The Senate vote is illegitimate and void. I do not accept this conviction. I remain President of the United States. I will continue executing my duties, and I will not leave the White House." That post was written before the vote concluded. He was prepared to reject the verdict before it was announced. And now the question is whether anyone can compel his compliance. At 4:15 p.m., in a separate location away from the White House, the vice president took the oath of office as president. The acting president, whose authority under the 25th Amendment was disputed but is now confirmed by Senate conviction and removal, was sworn in by a federal judge. Quote from the oath, "I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States." Under the Constitution, when a president is removed, the vice president becomes president. That transfer happened, but it happened in a conference room in the Eisenhower Executive Executive Office building next to the White House, not in the White House itself, because the former president is occupying the Oval Office and refusing to leave. At 4:23 p.m., the new president issued a statement. Quote, "The Senate has exercised its constitutional authority. I have taken the oath of office as president. I call on all federal employees and military personnel to recognize the constitutional chain of command. I call on the former president to respect the Senate's verdict and to vacate the White House immediately." That statement establishes that the new president views the former president's continued presence in the White House as unlawful. Drop a comment right now. Tell me who you think is the president right now. The person the Senate removed who refuses to leave, or the person who was just sworn in? I am reading every response because this is the question every federal employee and military commander is asking themselves. At 4:34 p.m., Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle issued an emergency directive to all Secret Service personnel. I have obtained the text. Quote, "Effective immediately, protective resources are assigned as follows. The individual sworn in as president at 4:15 p.m. is the president and receives full presidential protection. The individual removed from office by Senate conviction receives protection appropriate for former presidents. All agents are reminded of my testimony to the Senate that we protect the office of the presidency, not any individual. Agents will facilitate the lawful transition of power. That directive activates what Cheadle promised in her testimony. The Secret Service is siding with the new president. But at 4:47 p.m., sources inside the White House reported that Secret Service agents assigned to the Presidential Protection Detail are divided. Some agents have left the White House to join the new president's detail. Others have remained with the former president. The split is not clean. And for the first time in history, Secret Service agents are on opposite sides of a dispute about who to protect. Subscribe to this channel right now if you have not already, because what I'm about to show you is how the military, federal agencies, and foreign governments are responding to the unprecedented situation of two people claiming to be president. At 5:00 p.m., the chairman of the Joint Chiefs sent a message to all military commanders. Quote, "The Senate has convicted and removed the president. Under the Constitution, the vice president becomes president upon removal. The chain of command is now through the individual sworn in at 4:15 p.m. All military personnel are to recognize the constitutional chain of command. Any orders from the individual removed from office are not lawful and will not be obeyed. The military has chosen. They are following the new president." But at 5:15 p.m., the former president posted again, quote, "The military works for the commander-in-chief. I am the commander-in-chief. The Senate conviction was illegitimate. Any military personnel who follow orders from the individual falsely claiming to be president are committing mutiny and will be court-martialed. That is a direct threat to service members who follow the chairman's guidance." At 5:34 p.m., the acting attorney general, who was appointed by the former president before the 25th Amendment dispute began, announced his resignation. Quote, "I can no longer serve in a position where the legitimacy of executive authority is disputed. I resign effective immediately." Within an hour, the heads of the FBI, DEA, ATF, and U.S. Marshals Service all announced they recognize the new president as the lawful executive. The Justice Department has chosen sides. At 6:00 p.m., the new president held a brief press conference. Quote, "I am the President of the United States. The Senate has spoken. The Constitution has been followed. I call on the former president to leave the White House peacefully. If he does not, I have directed the U.S. Marshals Service to facilitate his departure. I do not want this to be resolved through force, but the rule of law must be upheld." That is the new president saying the Marshals will remove the former president if necessary. At 6:17 p.m., U.S. Marshals arrived at the White House Northwest Gate, the same gate where they were blocked on February 12th. This time, they are not serving a court order. They are executing a presidential directive. The new president has ordered the removal of the former president, and the Marshals are prepared to do it. But at 6:23 p.m., Secret Service agents still assigned to the former president informed the Marshals that they will not allow entry. The standoff from February 12th is repeating, but now the stakes are higher. The Marshals are acting under orders from the person who is constitutionally the president. The Secret Service agents are protecting someone who is constitutionally a former president, but who refuses to accept that status. Here's what we are watching for over the next 24 hours. 6 indicators that will tell us how this resolves. Indicator 1, does the former president leave voluntarily? If he walks out on his own, the crisis de-escalates. If he barricades himself, it escalates. Indicator 2, do Secret Service agents at the White House follow Director Cheadle's directive and stand down? If they allow marshals to enter, removal happens. If they resist, there is a physical confrontation between federal law enforcement. Indicator 3, do any military units act independently independently, if commanders split on who to obey, military cohesion fractures. Indicator 4, does Congress take any action to support the new president? If the House and Senate issue statements recognizing the new president, it provides political backing. Indicator 5, do foreign governments recognize the new president? If allies make statements, it adds international pressure on the former president to leave. Indicator 6, does the former president's support collapse when it becomes clear he cannot govern? If cabinet members resign, if agencies refuse his orders, if he loses the ability to function, he may conclude resistance is futile. Here are the 3 scenarios. Scenario 1, the former president leaves within 24 hours. Faced with isolation, with the Secret Service divided, with the military refusing orders, with agencies abandoning him, he walks out. He claims he is being forced out illegally, but he complies to avoid physical removal. This is the face-saving departure scenario. Scenario 2, the former president is physically removed. The U.S. Marshals, with Secret Service cooperation after Cheadle's directive takes full effect, enter the White House and escort him out. There is no violence, but the images of a former president being removed by federal agents become the defining moment of the crisis. This is the enforcement scenario. Scenario 3, the former president successfully resists. Secret Service agents refuse to follow Cheadle. The Marshals cannot enter. The military splits, with some units recognizing the new president and others the former. The government operates with 2 competing executives. This is constitutional collapse. Subscribe right now, like this video, comment with your prediction. Which scenario happens? I am tracking all 3, and as events unfold, you will see the analysis here immediately. Let me show you why this has never happened. The Senate has held 3 presidential impeachment trials before today. Andrew Johnson in 1868 was acquitted by 1 vote. If he had been convicted, there is no question he would have left office. Bill Clinton in 1999 was acquitted. Donald Trump in 2020 was acquitted. Trump in 2021 was acquitted. In none of those cases was there a conviction. And in none of those cases did anyone suggest the president would refuse to accept the verdict. Today, for the first time, the Senate convicted. 68 senators voted guilty. The president is removed under the Constitution, but he refuses to accept it. And the country faces the question of how to enforce removal when the removed president has enough support and enough resources to resist. What I know for certain right now, the Senate voted 68 to 32 to convict. 17 Republicans joined all Democrats. Chief Justice Roberts declared the president removed. The vice president was sworn in as president. The former president refuses to accept removal and remains in the White House. The Secret Service is divided. The military has chosen the new president. The Justice Department has chosen the new president. U.S. Marshals are at the White House gate attempting to execute a removal order, and Secret Service agents are blocking them. This is the constitutional crisis reaching its maximum point. The system worked, the Senate convicted, but the enforcement mechanism is being tested. If the former president can remain in the White House despite Senate conviction, despite being sworn out and replaced, despite federal law enforcement attempting to remove him, then Senate conviction is meaningless. The impeachment power exists in the Constitution, but cannot be enforced against a president who simply says no. The next 24 hours will reveal whether the United States is still a nation where constitutional processes can constrain executive power, or whether we have learned that power, once seized and held with enough determination, cannot be dislodged by votes or procedures, or even by 2/3 of the Senate declaring removal. What happens at the White House gate tonight and tomorrow will answer that question, and that answer will define what kind of country we are. Stay with this channel, turn on notifications. When the standoff resolves, when the former president leaves or is removed or successfully resists, you will see the analysis here immediately. This is not over. This is the Senate exercising the most serious constitutional remedy, and a former president saying that remedy does not apply to him. One of those positions will prevail, and which one determines whether American democracy survived its greatest test since the Civil War.